So when we last stopped, we had identified that the sales order manager really has two responsibilities, and that's a violation of the single responsibility principle in SOLID. One responsibility was to create the adapter that defines which service provider we're going to authorize charges with. And the second one was to handle talking to that service provider to actually authorize those charges. So what can we do here? Well, the easy solution is just to move the creation of the adapter outside of the sales order manager class and give it to the sales order manager. So we can do that simply by adding a parameter to the constructor. So the data type, of course, will be I credit card authorizer. And we can call it authorizer like we've been doing all along. And yeah, that does create a problem for us. We'll see it in a minute. And down here, instead of creating a new adapter, I'm just going to assign it the authorizer. And then, of course, the one on the left-hand side needs to have the this keyword associated with it, so that we're setting the member, not the parameter itself. Now, what about this problem? Well, this is happening over in the sales order manager tests where we are creating the sales order manager, because now we're calling the constructor without any value. So how can we fix that? Well, there's an easy way. Let's make an I credit card authorizer. Again, we'll just call it authorizer. And down here in the setup class, I'll keep it separate from everything else just so we can see it. I'm going to assign the authorizer a new BRC adapter. And then where we're creating the sales manager, I'm going to pass it that new authorizer. So the sales order manager no longer has the responsibility of deciding what authorizer it's going to use. And it doesn't want it. It wants low coupling. It wants to be disconnected from the concrete implementations of the service classes and the adapters in front of them. So this is called dependency injection, which is just a really fancy term for saying somebody else is going to create the dependency that the sales order manager needs, and then we're going to pass it to the adapter, to the sales order manager class. So if I run this, it's all going to work. But of course, I'm going to see some problems here because it's a non-deterministic test again, and order is completed may or may not actually be able to complete the order. But now that I'm passing in an authorizer, that leaves me an opportunity to pass in a test double, sometimes known as a mock. And I can control what my test double is going to do when the sales order manager calls it. So I'm going to do this by using Mockito to create my test double. Some folks might argue that for such a simple test double, I should just create a new class. And Mockito does introduce some overhead, but at the same time, I want to introduce you to the concept of using Mockito to do this. So the first thing I have to do is add an annotation extend with to the test class itself. And I want to extend this with the Mockito extension class. So what this does is it tells the test runner, ooh, we're going to run the tests in this class using the Mockito extension. And the Mockito extension is going to look for different things in the class and help me build the test double. So the first thing I'm going to do to get that going is to add an @mock extension in front of the authorizer. this tells Makito, build me an instance of something that provides the iCredit card authorizer interface. So because I'm doing that, I no longer need this new operation down here to go get a particular adapter. But I'm not quite done yet. Even though I've got a new object, which is the authorizer, I have to tell Makito how that object should behave when it's actually used. So I'm going to do that down here in the order is completed method. I'm going to use the when function from Makito, and we can pick that up by just importing it. Oops. Well, in order to handle that, I'm going to have to fill it out a little bit more because it needs to know that it's a function. So we'll import the static method org.makito.makito.when. Okay, and when expects to be passed an example of how this authorizer is going to be called. So I'm going to call the authorizer, which has the authorize method. And the first thing I have to do is give it the big decimal value that I expect to be passed. So I'll just go off to the sales order and get my total. And the second thing I have to pass is the card number, and I have that right on the line in front of me here. So we'll just pass it the card number. And it looks like I'm making a method call, but I'm actually calling Makito here, and it's setting up the scenario for me. So when the authorize method is called with this total and this card number, then I want it to do something. And I do that by calling then return. And since this is the authorizer, I need to return a token if it's successful. So it just needs to be a string, and I'm simply going to pass 1, 2, 3, 4. Nothing special inside of that. Okay, now everything is set up. So if I come back here and I run my tests again, every time I run the test, I'm going to get the same result because my test double is controlling what the sales order manager gets back as its result. So we accomplished 3 things here. First, we cleaned up some code smells like the multiple return statements. And then we established the adapter pattern to manage the external service classes and decouple the sales order manager from those service classes so it only sees the one interface that it needs to worry about. And then we set up dependency injection so that the sales order manager doesn't decide what adapter is going to be used. It's passed into the sales order manager when it needs it. And that allows us to adapt our program to future changes that we have to make. For example, if another service provider comes along, we can simply create a new adapter class, and then we can inject it into the sales order manager and it will use it. It also allows us to create test doubles in our unit test classes and pass those test doubles into the sales order manager so we can control the results that the sales order manager sees during a test. Refactoring to clean up your code, decoupling your code from concrete dependencies, and building in dependency injection are all established practices that you should be using in your code.